Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter. Thank you so much for joining us. Fresh off of Trump's victory in the Middle East, he is turning his sights to Ukraine in an attempt to see if he can parlay his newfound success and apparent skill in negotiating peace between countries into something between Russia and Ukraine, which is interesting. I was going to say I think it's going to be harder, but having said that, considering how long Israel and Palestine have been going at it in one way or another, for the Palestinians, I can, yeah. I will make a couple of suggestions before going forward. First of all, I do think Trump gets credit for the peace deal. I think he gets almost exclusive credit for the peace deal, not his advisors, not even Netanyahu. I think Trump gets credit for it. That I can think of in his entire first and second administration, this is the first time I've ever decided or felt that he gets credit for anything. Having said that, if I recall Revelations correctly, and this is not a joke, the Antichrist actually negotiates peace in the Middle East before the coming of Jesus. Yes, there's a huge war, but then a peace gets negotiated between the 12 tribes of Israel that get unified, and that's the Antichrist. So that would make Trump, just saying. Now, Trump does deserve credit, but there's more than a couple of caveats to this. And so let's break down those caveats, and then we'll get into where things stand, which is unfortunately roughly where one might expect. Netanyahu cannot have peace with the Palestinians. The reason is, and we've said this many, many times, so we're not going to get too much into this, as soon as there's peace, he goes to jail. As long as there's war, there is a wartime cabinet. His cabinet has been reduced dramatically. Most of his cabinet wants him gone, wants him removed as prime minister. The members of the cabinet that he's been willing to or able to keep are all the hard-liners on the right. And they're willing to keep him so long as he keeps doing war and doing his their bidding in other ways, like keeping their kids out of the military. And this is an absolute thing. The hard line, the really strong religious believers all send their kids to a really ultra-Orthodox school, and kids from that school are exempt from the military draft service. So Netanyahu literally has to do their bidding, or he gets removed from being prime minister. Well, it's not that bad being removed from prime minister. What's the big deal? Big deal is that as prime minister, he can't go to jail, but he is currently under indictment. And depositions have been taken for numerous crimes that he's committed and will almost certainly be convicted of, and will be probably in jail awaiting trial. They just can't do that while he's prime minister. So he needs to maintain a wartime cabinet. As soon as his cabinet expands, he gets booted as prime minister, or as soon as there are elections, he gets booted as prime minister. He needs to keep the war going to stay out of jail. It's a unique position to be in. Being that he's a complete sociopath, he's perfectly willing to live with the consequences of that, killing as many of other people's kids as he needs to, so long as he doesn't go to jail. Ironically, this is how Trump was largely able to succeed. I don't think Trump really cares about other human beings much either, so he can empathize with Netanyahu's problems in a way no previous president could. I don't think Biden could have succeeded here. I don't think Trump could have succeeded in the way that Trump has. This is why Trump gets unique credit, but it's a dubious honor, because I think Trump was able to find a way to meet Netanyahu's needs that no other president would have attempted, in part because of the ethical concerns. We don't know what he did or said to get Netanyahu on board with a peace deal. But we have said prior, and I think this is true, it has to be either, A, that they're going to find a way to keep the war cabinet in place, despite the fact that there's no war, but Trump has no real say in that. B, a full, political asylum in the United States for Netanyahu. That's problematic because Israel is an ally, but his family's already here, so he could move here and never face the consequences for the horrific crimes, including war crimes and genocide, that he's ever done. Now, again, I don't know very many previous American presidents that would have offered him this. I do believe Trump would have offered him this, and that's how, I think that's a requisite, something along those lines. We don't know what he did. Somehow he got Netanyahu on board. And I don't think there's an ethical way to do it, which is why I don't think any previous American president could have done it. So as much as we poo-poo Trump, I think he's the only guy who could have gotten this done. As someone with a degree in philosophy, I do have to think about what are the ethics here. It's an interesting problem. Do you, to save 2.1 million people who are starving to death, families and children starving to death, do you take a man who's responsible for that and doesn't care and say, I will absolve you of all your crimes, at least as much as I can. I won't hold you accountable for them. You can come and live under my protection as long as you stop all this killing. I don't know how you make a deal like that. That's very much the do you negotiate with terrorists problem. And I'm on the side of you never negotiate with terrorists. Having said that, the few times that we've negotiated with terrorists, sometimes, it's sort of like, well, if the terrorists are holding 2.1 million hostages that are going to starve to death, and in exchange you have to let one guilty as sin man go free. Wow. And I don't think that's a difficult problem for Trump. I think Trump's just like, oh yeah, I can, sure, bring him on board, because Trump's the same way. So the reason I find this interesting is this is the first time we have ever aired a show where Trump, as president, can take credit for having done something I don't think any other president could have done. He did it, in my in my view, as much out of his failings as anything else. But it's a weird position to be in, but we try to be as balanced as possible, and I think that's fair. Now, we still don't know for a fact that that's what was offered, but we do know something had to be offered, because Bibi cannot let the war end and stay in Israel. Because if he does, he's either dead or he's in prison, period. That's not really up for debate by anybody in any circle anywhere. So whatever Trump offered him, and I have no doubt, I mean, I wouldn't think Biden would make such an offer. That's why the war continued under Biden. I don't think Obama would make such an offer. I don't think we've had previous presidents who would really make such an offer. Nixon's the closest. So here we have a corrupt president able to actually accomplish something positive because of that corruption. So let's at least give credit where credit is due and recognize that it's a very difficult problem for the rest of us. Again, I don't think it was for him, but do you let Netanyahu, who's indicted on war crimes by the UN, who's indicted on many other crimes in Israel, do you let him go free if it means that aid starts flowing to Gaza again and families can survive? You and I would have difficulty with that. I think most of us would probably land on, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do, even though it sends the message to future, dictators that, oh, wow, all I have to do is kill enough people and I can get away scot-free. Well, they've already kind of got that message. So it's a tough, it's not an easy problem, except for, again, Trump, who I think has absolutely no qualms about it. So here we are. It is 5 years of a Trump presidency, and he has finally accomplished something that only really he could do, and that he probably does genuinely deserve credit for. That's how long it's taken him. And believe me, this is a guy who wants credit for walking up the stairs without falling down. I wish I was joking about that. I'm not. He's had a soliloquy on how proud he is that he can walk stairs better than Biden, But the reason he can do it, and he's very honest about this, is because he just goes slow. He's not trying to break any records. So we can give him something. Having said that, it doesn't look like it's going to last very long. Trump has an issue with details, and there weren't a lot of details in this. I was okay with that, and I said that when we first started talking about this, because this is one of those, we have to save lives as quickly as possible. We'll sort out the details as we hit them. Let's just get this done. And again, that's a way that is somewhat unique to Donald Trump, and he was well positioned for. Having said that, we don't know how these violations started. We have some speculation. One speculation is, we know, for example, that Israel has pulled back to a point. They had controlled 80% of Gaza. They have now pulled back and control a significantly smaller percentage. But it looks from what we can tell as if the government has been unclear as to where those lines are. The Palestinians don't have a government right now that can inform them where those lines are. So if they're not informed gently by the Israelis, they can cross those lines by accident. And it appears as if they've been crossing those lines by accident and getting shot by the Israelis. 6 people have been killed. 6 Palestinians have been killed. A number more wounded apparently, from what we can tell, crossing into areas still controlled, as per agreement, by Israel. Now, should Israel be shooting and killing these people? Probably not. Having said that, the Israelis don't know if these are suicide terrorists. They think they may be Hamas, so they're going to be trigger happy. I get that. But you have to realize that there are a lot of innocent civilians out there who just don't know what the hell is going on, because you've destroyed all the infrastructure for knowing what the hell's going on. Israel, meanwhile, as an apparent retaliation for, again, what appears to be civilians inadvertently crossing the line, has now cut aid to Gaza again. This is a cornerstone of this peace deal. If that aid is not restored immediately, the fact that you can't start sending food and have famine conditions, and it was declared a famine. Not even starvation. That's worse than starvation. A famine. Famine conditions don't end with one day of supplies flowing. And by the way, it takes a while to get up to speed. So it's like, oh, we've opened it up for a day. 1 or 2 trucks get through. Oh, we're closed. So it goes back to famine conditions instantly. So right now, Israel has, from what we can tell, closed the border. They have not opened the border to Egypt. Egypt is willing to and has trucks in line to send food to the Palestinians, and Israel will not open those gates. They have stopped their flow of food, and Hamas, in retaliation, has taken to executing people on the streets. Now, this comes from Reuters. Let me see what Reuters, I want to quote Reuters, because there's an issue, which is we don't know who they're executing. The only people that I can think of that they'd be executing, and there is footage on Reuters of the executions, and it's actual executions. They take people out in the middle of the street, they have the people get on their knees, and then they execute them. But the only people that Hamas has access to right now are Palestinians, so they'd be executing Palestinians, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I don't know who else they'd be executing. This is in now the Palestinian-controlled territories that they're doing this. They're doing this to show that they still have power and to sort of reaffirm. Let me just see. I don't know how I want to present this. Let's see. This video circulated late Monday. What I'm going to do is do a screen grab and see if I can maybe drop this in, because I actually think this is worth seeing. Can I just drop it in like that? That would be awfully convenient if I could, which is why I probably can't. So I don't know who Hamas is executing, and That's surprising, but we know that they've executed a number of people in the streets, and let me. I've got an image here. It's not. It's not. You don't see. Nobody's pulling a trigger yet, but it's obviously. It's obviously a little unsettling. Let me just try to get this here. I think I can get it. Yeah, there it is. So this image was on social media. It was actually it's not just the image, it's the full video of them executing these men. And we don't know who these guys are. And actually somebody pointed out, yeah, Hamas, best described, behaves like a warlord. There are now other gangs vying for control in Palestine. A number of other organizations have decided that they can be the military better than Palestine, so they're starting their own organizations to compete, better than Hamas, so they're starting their own organizations to compete with Hamas. So it may be that that's who they're executing. Whoever it is has to be Palestinians of some kind or another. How ticked off is Israel going to be about this? Probably not very, because they don't care, but Netanyahu has every reason to say, oh, they're killing each other and they're under our protection too, so we have to go back in there. So why is Netanyahu cutting off aid again and essentially killing the peace deal? Well, there's one of two reasons. Either something has gone terribly wrong, or my earlier assessment of Trump made an assumption that was untrue. My earlier assessment, one of the things I said, was the only way to get Bibi on board is to offer him amnesty or some way that he's not going to jail. He will continue this war until jail is not an option for him. In fact, one of the reasons I started to give Trump some credit, I started to give Trump credit really when he arrived in Israel, and the first thing he said was, Netanyahu's done such a good thing, you need to pardon him. And I was just like, oh, he knows. Trump has finally figured this out. It took him a while, but he figured out the real obstacle to peace is Netanyahu is facing charges that he's going to go to jail for. That's the obstacle. Because he's a man in a position of power that can keep himself out of jail so long as he keeps racking up the bodies. Trump has figured that out. And so he told Netanyahu, look, we'll give you asylum in the U.S. I will pitch to the Kismet as much as I can that you should be given a pardon. We will find a way to make sure you don't go out of jail. And as long as Netanyahu believes this, there's no reason for him to continue the war. So he's perfectly willing to stop, so long as he really believes that Trump can deliver. Either that belief has changed, or it was never as cemented as it looked like in the first place. Netanyahu simply wanted to get Trump to shut up and said, okay, I believe you. You're going to keep me out of jail. This will be great. You're going to talk to my government. My government will not press charges. We'll stop. And then after 24 hours, such that Trump can do his dance and say, I just solved the Middle East. Now I'm going to Ukraine. Trump can do that. And then, boom, shut it all down again. One of those two things is true. So if it's the latter, we're back to Trump really doesn't deserve any credit for having solved this in the first place. If it's the former, okay, Trump did something that's a noteworthy accomplishment, but like so many presidents before him, it failed. And it failed for a large number of. This is a complicated and difficult topic. Speaking of, there is a new group that is forming, and the suggestion is that Hamas needs to transition from a military organization into a political one. That I think is that goes without saying, but the fact that they're talking about doing it now, I think is a good sign. So who are they looking? Who is pushing forward most with this effort? A man by the name of Cutoff, who is returning to the West Bank, and he has a plan that he says will convert. He said the Fatah movement must change to regain the Palestinians' confidence and no longer be a military organization. He is the nephew of late Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. Excuse me? What was that? Nephew of, his name is Cutoff Arafat. Should be fine. All right. So, yeah, there's no problem. There's going to be no problems there. I anticipate sunshine and roses going forward. Oh, dear Lord. Glad Trump knows what he's doing. I'd really hate to see what things were like if he was a complete imbecile. All right. So, Jester, $2. So, should we pardon Trump of all but one crime? Excellent question, and that is the question, right? That's the question. That's the problem. Having said that, the question, there are differences. There are significant differences. Right now, Trump is not holding 2.1 million people hostage. We've had, and as Andrew, we're going to have an end time tonight as Andrew and myself, and we're going to talk about this. And one of the things that as Andrew really enjoys talking about is consequentialism versus, what is it, deontology or denotology. The idea of, do you just have a set of rules that you live by? Never negotiate with hostages. Never tell a lie. Always do the right thing. Stuff like that. Okay, well, if you follow those, you should be okay ethically or morally, right? Well, what happens when you're in Germany and a Nazi knocks on the door and says, are you holding Jewish, refugees in your attic? If you think it's always wrong to tell a lie, you're going to do something that, in my view, is highly unethical. That's a good. We'll get to that one in a second too. You're going to do something that's highly unethical. You're going to tell the truth to a Nazi official. So it can't just be denotology. Having said that, it can't just be consequentialism either, because consequentialism, the trolley problem, is the best, I think, criticism of consequentialism. That, if you just look at the consequences and make sure that the consequences are always good, then your actions are justified. That's got its own problems. It gets a little more complicated, so I won't get into it. But the problem is, again, right now, 2.1 million families are starving, and by letting this one guy get away with it, and you could sit there and say it's a slippery slope. That's its own fallacy. The problem is there's no law to which there isn't an exception, and there's no ethical rule to which there isn't an exception at some point. If there were, we'd all be ethical people, because we'd be able to build a foundation off of that. The problem is life isn't black and white. There's so many shades of gray, it's insane. And that's what we spend all of our time arguing about, is where do you draw the line on the shades of gray? And I wish it were simple. And I detest Trump. That's one reason why I actually look forward to giving him credit, because I think the hallmark of somebody who has an open mind is being able to give credit to people who he detests. Having said that, the credits for an ostensibly it's a difficult, when Obama assassinated, well, I could think of a number of areas where Obama said or did something that was an awfully gray area. And the problem is there's feature creep here. There's gray creep. Once you make one thing acceptable, the next one, again, slippery slope. But the problem is that's not necessarily a good argument against doing the right thing. It's a good argument for vigilance. The only thing that I've ever found that is most likely to encourage moral behavior is vigilance. It's trying to understand all the sides and the consequences before you go forward, and it ain't guaranteed to work. It's just the best we've got. And I think, honestly, if I would err on I personally, and this is probably a personal decision for everybody, but if you told me, look, we can put Benjamin Netanyahu up in a home in Florida, which is probably a prison in and of itself, but let's just say he goes to Florida, a decent home, he's going to be with his family for the rest of his life, and you get to he's going to live out the rest of his days, which are going to be reasonably short, by the way, regardless, because he's getting up there. And in exchange, there'll be peace between Palestine and Israel. The Palestinians will be able to live in peace. You're going to have people able to raise their families, go to work. You're going to have a Palestinian state, because he's the number one reason that there isn't one right now. And you're going to solve that problem. Probably worth it, in my view. But I tend to be a consequentialist. So, and I think, yeah, anyways, it's a tough call. It's not an easy call. So what we have now, though, is whether that call has been made or not. Yeah, Netanyahu is 75 years old. Whether that call has been made or not, we don't know. Netanyahu appears to be going back on it. The aid has been cut off. At least 6 Palestinians are dead, and Hamas has been executing what we believe are its rivals, but we don't know, in the streets. And Yasser Arafat's nephew has decided that what this situation needs is an Arafat to come in and take over. So Qudwa Arafat has entered the West Bank with a Gaza plan that he says will help, and that he is ready to, quote, help govern in Gaza and the West Bank, and wants to transform Hamas into a political party instead of a military organization, which at a minimum, he's right about that. But it is, wow. And as I said before, Trump has already pivoted. He has already pivoted to Ukraine. He has already said that he is now going to solve the Ukraine problem, having failed to realize that 24 hours is not enough to actually declare. It's enough to declare that you have a deal. He got a deal, and he got all sides to sign it, and ostensibly agreed to it. That's a small miracle. And again, couldn't have been done by somebody with ethics. But having said that, that doesn't mean it's done. And it looks like it is falling apart rapidly, and we may be right back to where we were last week. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on it. Kudos if it lasts. But at this point, it shows signs of falling apart rapidly. The next thing I would anticipate is Israel has said that and this is one of the sticking points that we had talked about. The biggest sticking point right now with Israel is that the bodies of the remaining hostages. So every hostage a living hostage has now been freed, which was agreed to, and I think should earn Palestine Hamas some points, because they've kept up that deal. They have not returned the bodies. One of the things that they've said is that the bodies are going to take some time to find. I take this to mean that they buried a lot of the bodies, that they didn't keep the body. I mean, after somebody dies, they may not have kept the bodies. So it's hard to keep a body. I'm not saying from personal experience. I'm just moving on. So Israel says it wants the bodies of the others back, which is it's an understandable request, but it's not an entirely reasonable one. Hamas has said that they will do their best. That's what they're trying to do now. And Israel has shut off aid until such time as the bodies are returned. Well, it's going to take weeks to return the bodies, and they need the aid now. So the deal is not completely collapsed, but it's in danger of collapse. So we'll see. Let's see. Israel to half Gaza aid over slow return. Okay, so this is from ground news, which means that they've sourced it from several different organizations, that Israel will actually have at least half of its aid going through and half will be stopped. Last I saw was from Reuters. They had stopped it all. If they're going to allow half through, that's big. That's big. It's not enough, but it's big. Really, I'd like to see them open the gate to Egypt and let Egypt, then Egypt gets to do the aid. It solves a lot of problems for Israel, and they don't have to manage the logistics of any of it and just let Egypt do it. But logic would say that burial is better if you're in a war zone with no refrigerator. Well, exactly. They can't guarantee keeping the body is important to these are all highly religious people, so they understand the importance of keeping the body. Having said that, it's a war zone in the desert. It's a war zone in the desert. So half of me thinks that Israel is just doing this to Netanyahu just said, well, if we don't get the bodies back, we're no deal. So Netanyahu's tanking it. And half of me thinks they're just religious zealots who aren't thinking this fully through. Either way, the bodies is, I think, an unrealistic expectation. It's been 2 years. It's been 2 years, and some of these people died at the very beginning. It seems to be punitive. It's hard to say. Emotions are tense over there. Anyways, that's what we're looking at. So tonight, Xander and I will be discussing that. We'll be discussing what's going on in the U.S. and the primary thing that all of this is designed to get people to forget about is the Epstein files. Where's the progress on that? Who's got what? And what is the status of the discharge petition? The discharge petition looks like isn't going to even be signed until the government opens. That's not a requirement. That's just something Johnson is doing for the sake of it because he doesn't want the discharge petition signed. So he won't seat the final person, the final Democrat that's needed to sign the petition. Meanwhile, the government shows no signs of reaching a deal that could open. We are going to be discussing that tonight as well, so I hope you'll join us, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard, but wanted to give you a update on how the current situation is going in Israel. There was huge progress for about 24 hours. It is stumbling rapidly, and we'll see. So, yep, and there's Xandering, and look forward to seeing you tonight, good sir, 9 p.m. Eastern, and a lot to talk about, including the fact that I actually was forced to compliment Trump. I still can't get the taste out of my mouth, but that's what they made napalm for. Because I got to tell you, Banaka ain't going to do it. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern, for In Time with Xandering and myself. Have a good night, all.